Alright, so it's been a couple of days now since Rush Duel's release, so I thought I'd give you guys a bit of a meta update, a bit of a tier list, showcasing what I think the current metagame sort of looks like. We've had a bunch of COG results and a bunch of tournament results to sort of give us a rough understanding of what the game's going to look like going forward, at least in the short term. So I'm going to give you guys my sort of take on what I think the metagame's going to shake up to be. Now, obviously, we're still very early on, so I might not have gone every single deck technically here. There might be a couple of decks that are more memey or more rogue tier or just undiscovered stuff that is just not going to feature on here because we haven't seen them yet. But I've tried to gather most of the decks that sort of exist in the game at the moment, especially the ones that you're seeing all the time. So I'll give you guys my opinion on where they sort of stack up currently in the rankings. So let's get into it. So first of all, we have Summon Skull. Now, Summon Skull isn't actually Summon Skull, it's more considered aggro at the moment, but the reason this deck sort of exists, it exists because of Legend Draw. Your goal is basically you'll just search for this card later on, and then you just play all sort of good cards in your deck list. It's sort of like Dragoncaster, except doesn't use the sort of standard Dragoncaster skills generally. It looks sort of like one of these decks. It's just a deck that's playing like either Hammer Crush Draw or it's playing Legend Draw, and just playing all good stuff, and it's more of a pile sort of a deck list. Some of them play random things like Shining Superstar, some of them play Dragius, some of them play Spellcaster sort of stuff. It's just deck lists that are just all over the place. So in general, it's just a good stuff pile deck list. Now, I personally think this deck list is a little bit on the overrated side of things. I think the reason it's done so well early is because a lot of people didn't really have access to the better skills or the better cards yet, so they just tossed all the good stuff into one deck list, played a couple of good skills, and just called it a deck. I don't rate this deck too highly. I think it's just a worse variant of the skilled decks. I think the Dragoncaster deck list pure is way better than this. I think Spellcaster is probably at least on the same level of this. I'm not a huge fan of it, so I'll put it in like tier 3-ish sort of territory. I think this deck list it's good, it's not wrong, it's definitely better than Rogue tier, but it's just all good stuff piled into one. I think as more people lean towards the more structured decks rather than the pile decks, they'll move away from this deck a bit, because it's more, yeah, I just think it's just a bit too jank. Alright, next up we have, well, the actual best deck in the game, which is really saddens me to say, and that is Dragoncaster, which is basically just dragons and your spellcasters put together, normally with just whatever skill. Sometimes it's Legend Draw, I think most of the time it's Legend Draw. Yes, whatever good skill you've got, and you're just playing your dragons and your spellcasters together. I'm really depressed this deck is actually so good. I kind of was hoping, because it sort of mimics what Rush IRL TCG was like, but I don't really... Yeah, I'm not a fan of having these two cards being allowed to be played in the same deck. I don't know why these two weren't... This card wasn't limited to 3 on release as well, so you can't play these two together. Because it kind of pains me to see that, like, the Dragon deck is weaker than this, and the Spellcaster deck is weaker than this. I would prefer them to be, like, separate decks, so there's a bit more variety, rather than people just sort of slamming them together. It feels a little bit to me, but it's definitely the best deck. Why have I got an S tier? That's maybe tier 0. I don't think it's currently a tier 0 meta, although it's incredibly popular at the moment. I think there is actually a specific counter to this, which we'll talk about in just a second. But for the moment, it's definitely a high tier 1. It's by far the best deck. It beats everything but one deck. Alright, then we have Vault Condor. Now, despite what my video said, where I was on day 1 thinking this one, just from my first looks, thought this would be the best deck, it's by far not the best deck. So, if you don't know what a Vault Condor deck list looks like, it looks something like this. Just playing the structure deck style cards. You can sometimes play 7th Row Magician in it if you like. Sometimes you just play purely on this. But generally, it's based around these two dudes and the Lightning Shift skill. So, this deck, I think it's... I don't know if it's tier 3 or if it's Rogue. It's sort of in the middle-ish. It's really not that great. I think it's weaker than tier 3, but calling it Rogue's kind of bad, because I think it's better than, like, any other sort of Rogue-ish level deck list, so I think it's tier 3. But, I don't know, it doesn't feel that great compared to some of the other stuff in here. So I'm going to stick it in tier 3, but I don't actually think it's that great. I might even add a tier 3.5. How do I do that? Can I add one? Let me add a tier 3.5 if I can. I don't know how to... How do you add a tier on this thing? Oh yeah, just the little thing, isn't it? No, this one. There we go. Alright, 3.5. I don't actually think this deck is that great, but I don't think it's Rogue level. I just want to acknowledge that it's definitely worse than the other things in Tier 3. At least from like glances at it from tournament play and stuff. I watched a tournament today where there were 10 entrants for it, which is the third most in the tournament. I think the one after was like 12 and 15. And it got, every single one of them got knocked out before top card. Every single one, which is, that's not a good showing for a deck list. So I'm not confident anymore. Alright, next up we have your Beetle. So if you don't know what the Beetle deck list looks like, the Beetle deck list is interesting, because it's essentially just, it's still playing the Dragius, and it's still playing the, look at Brad's deck list. It's still playing the Dragius, it's still playing the Sevens Road, because you can still play them together, they're still like the best cards in the game. But then we're playing this Beetle, which is gaining attack stats based off of the low-level monsters in your graveyard. So this deck list, it's cool, but I feel like it's literally just the Summon Skull aggro deck, but without the actual other cards. It's just playing a Beetle instead and just playing a bunch of jank. So unless you draw the Beetle, you're just drawing a bunch of really shitty tributes. You're doing less damage than normal on average. It will still work, but I wouldn't say it's anything more than like a rogue levelish deck. It's definitely not better than these two. No chance. Alright, next up we have your Dark Magician. This is also another rogue level deck. So the reason I went Dark Magician Girl instead of Dark Magician is because, well, I can't actually show a Dark Magician Girl deck list on here because there's no actual, I don't think anyone's even played. Let me look, let's see if anyone's actually played it yet. I'm in the wrong category. I know people have been playing Dark Magician, but I don't know if anyone's been playing the Dark Magician skill. It's not even gonna let me see them, is it? Yeah, it's not gonna let me see it. But yeah, essentially, it's not really looking like, let me see if it's in, look in skills. Maybe someone's played the actual skill. Let's see. There's been one person who did get cog with it. It's essentially just a worse variant of trying to play the, either the Spellcaster deck or the Dragon. It's basically just the Spellcaster deck, but a weaker version of it. Because this skill, unfortunately, it is basically giving you 3 Summon Skulls in your deck, which feels pretty good. But it's giving you, it's not giving you the advantage that the other skill gives you, which is just easier access to your 7th Row Magician, which is a way better card. So, in general, it's not the worst skill out there, but I think it's just, if you're playing this deck list, you're literally gimping yourself, because I think Spellcasters is probably just, it's probably just a better version of it. But I guess since it is mostly just the Spellcaster cards, you could probably put it in this category, but I'm going to keep it in Rogue for now. Alright, then we have your Yami Roller. I think this deck list is tier 2. This deck list feels really good. The main reason this deck list feels so good is because it directly counters the tier 1 deck list. The main reason it counters it is there's not a whole lot of actual outs to it other than 7's Row Magician. So this deck list, it just, if you don't know what it does, basically the whole goal of it is you're just going to summon out your Yami Roller, and all he does is he just completely cockblocks your opponent out of being able to summon any level 7 or higher monsters for the next turn, or normal summon them. Which means if you summon another one the next turn, you can just basically just keep locking your opponent out as much as you like, as long as you keep drawing this guy. And even just delaying the turn once is generally enough to force your opponent to put 3 monsters in defense position, activate a Pierce, or use this guy to attack directly, and they just die. And the good news is, the main deck list, the really popular deck list in the game, the most popular deck list, only has like 7's Row Magician as an out to it. They don't really have any other way to deal with it. It directly counters Dragius, which feels really good because that card is absurd against any other deck list. It's the only deck in the game that has an actual decent turn 1 right now, where if you go first, you summon your dude, your opponent can't just summon a Dragius and beat over all your dudes. It feels really goddamn strong, and I think it's really good against this deck list. The reason it's not any higher though is because there are a bunch of counters to this deck. Thankfully, it's still good right now because this deck list is way popular than anything else, but as soon as other stuff becomes slightly more popular, this thing might fall a little bit because it does lose to a lot of stuff. Because, for example, your main boss monster, if you didn't know his effect, he can be flipped face down, and if you do flip him face down, he loses his Floodgate effect. So a deck like Psychic, which has a searchable Book of Moon, actually just has an out to this deck list on a search skill, which is, yeah, just really, really strong against it. Also, Spellcaster, they have a monster which can special summon the, let me go bring it up real quick. They have a monster that can special summon their dude from hand, and he only prevents normal summoning. So, if your opponent activates their skill, their 7's Axel Road, and have this dude in their hand, summon this guy, search for their boss monster, and they can just special summon it, ignoring your card's effect, and beat over it in the same turn. So, There's a lot of counters to this, which is why it's not higher, but thankfully, whilst this deck is increasingly popular, this thing will stay high tier. Alright, next we have, I don't even know what this thing's called. It's definitely a meme deck. This is definitely a, there's a skill based around this specific monster. I've forgotten the name of it. It's like some dragon thing or something. Let's see, there's not many cards in the game, so I can probably just find it. Let's put dragon in the, dragon. Let's see, is he in here? Yeah, this dude. There's a skill based around this guy, and it can really stat boost the shit out of him. But I feel like out of all the variations of dragons so far, it's just not the greatest. I think there's actually, the skill for this actually stops you playing... Does it stop you playing Draggy, so it gives you only one copy or something? I know, it stops you doing something that was really dumb. I've completely forgotten. Is it Curse of Dark? Yeah, it is this one, right? Yeah, it's going to use if the only level 4 higher monster in your decks are either all dragon type normal monsters or multi-strike. Oh, he does let you play it. Yeah, I haven't been a fan of this deck list though. I've seen it a couple of times and it hasn't really done a whole lot. It's just sort of the weakest variant of dragon I've seen so far, so I haven't liked it too much. Alright, Psychic. Psychic, I think, is tier 3. This deck list, it's sort of adapting a bit at the moment. It's hard to sort of see what the best variant is. My variant that I uploaded a video for, despite it being really fun, probably just wasn't the best variant. It just seems to not have enough high levels in it. I think maybe you should be playing the level 6 2000 attack monster. That seems pretty good, actually. So I'm not sure what the best variant of this deck list is, but as it evolves, it seems to have some pretty good matchups and things like your Yummy Ruler. And in general, it just is a really good deck list. It has a lot of solid plays it can make. So I think it is tier 3. And from tournament results as well, it seems to have been leading more towards the actually getting into the top cut, which is good for it. So yeah, I wouldn't put it any higher than this. It's just sort of it's just a good deck list overall, but it's definitely not better than these two. Alright, Dragon. I think very similarly, it's the main issue with Dragon is I feel like whenever you play it, you're just playing a worse version of Dragon Spellcaster. You might as well just play Dragon Spellcaster. In fact, I think I'd put Dragon as far as say it's actually 3.5. I don't think it's as good as these two, but I wouldn't say it's necessarily rogue level. I think you can probably top some tournaments with this thing. So, yeah, I'll put this very similar to this deck. I think these decks are probably both on par with each other. You can definitely reach Cog with them, you can definitely climb with them, but in general, if you're going to play this deck, you might as well be playing Dragon Spellcaster. It's just the sad truth of the matter. Even with the card that just discards like half your hand to nuke the field for that cool little combo, it really just isn't as good as just playing this deck. So, yeah, as bad as it sounds, until they make it so that these two archetypes are split up, pure Dragon just isn't really much of a deck list compared to it. So it's just all the way down here. Alright, now we have a, I just realized we're missing something. We're missing pure Spellcaster, aren't we? Yeah, missing pure Spellcaster, so I'll add pure Spellcaster at the end, or I'll just sort of tell you what tier I'd put it, because there isn't meant to be a Spellcaster deck on here. Basically, I will just say it now, there's a pure Spellcaster deck list, which is meant to just have this dude's card art. That would just be a pure, I don't know if I want to put it tier 3, or if I want to put it... Yeah, I think it's tier 3. It's better than Dragon, it's better than this, and it's probably on par with Psychic, and it has a good matchup into Yummy Roller, so it's definitely tier 3, I think. So if you pure Spellcaster should be sitting here. I don't actually have a picture of it on here because I'm a complete and utter dumb ass. I don't think it'll let me add one, will it? Hang on. Additional images. Can I add one? Does that work? Oh, it does work. There we go. Alright, there we go. Never mind. This would be tier 3. So I like this card. I like this deck a lot. I think it has a good matchup into Yummy Ruler, and I think it's definitely better than these two, but it still has the same issues as same with this card or this deck list, where you should probably just be playing the Dragon Spellcaster combination instead. But it is a good deck list. It has a good matchup into Yummy Ruler, and in general, it's just alright. Alright, this one. This deck list is your explosive deck thing, Explosion. Now, I have not seen this on ladder yet. I think I've seen zero gameplay of it, so I can't really rate this based on experience. But based on just reading what the skill does and reading this card, I don't know why you'd play this other than playing it as a meme over just Spellcaster. I think it's actually just a meme deck. Personally, it just seems like a shitty version of Spellcaster, and I think I'd prefer to play any of these decks over it, but like I said, I haven't actually seen much gameplay of it, so I can't prove that, but I think it's just a meme. Alright, then we have your Noodle, which is sadly just a meme. I just saw a top 16, I think, deck list yesterday from a 60-person tournament where someone actually managed a top cut with this. The skill's kind of cool. It's just we're missing a lot of the actual noodle cards because there's a lot of noodle stuff. I can't even show you a noodle deck list because there isn't even one on here yet. It's essentially based around this noodle boss monster who just there's just not enough support for him yet. There's sort of enough. The skill's pretty good. It just allows you to just buff all your stuff every single turn. But yeah, I just don't think there's enough actual noodle stuff yet for this to be viable. But this will be a tiered deck list, I think, down the line. Hopefully. Hopefully if Konami's nice enough to give us some noodle support. And finally, we have your Dian Keto, which I put this on here because I know the character's coming and we've seen some leaks for the skills. So I thought it'd be kind of fun to give my early impressions of where I think this deck would be. And from just pure guesses, which, let's be real here, I thought this deck list was a lot better on release, so take this with a grain of salt. But I read some of the skills, and sort of like life point gainy skills. They didn't seem all that impressive to me, and the actual cards themselves weren't that much of an upgrade over what we already have for the deck list, so I think it's probably just a roguish deck. I wouldn't put it any higher. I don't think it pairs up with these guys. So I think it's more a rogue deck. It does seem like it'll be playable at least, but I don't think it's I don't think it'll break into the top of tiers. So yeah, that's gonna do it for my tier list. Let me know in the comments if you guys agree with this or if you disagree with this. If I missed any deck lists, feel free to leave them below and I'll give you a rating for them just myself. So yeah, I'll try to reply to as many of the comments asking about random ass deck lists as I can. If there is actually a bunch of deck lists I've completely forgotten about. So yeah, thank you guys for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video. Remember to like, subscribe, all that kind of stuff. Plenty of Rush Duel content still to come, as well as some Master Duel content when this pack for Cash Tier and shit releases on the 9th or 10th, whenever they normally do that. So yeah, just like and subscribe for that. Hope to see you in the next one. Laters.